like that, just direct them towards me.
Sorry. Thank you.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is O'Brien. I represent Mr Dylan Voller. Mr Giles, I want to ask you about this comment that you made after the Four Corners program of the cultural cover-up within the corrective services system. Were you aware in April of 2012 that Dr Howard Barth, the Children's Commissioner, met with senior staff, including the CEO and two senior members of the Youth Justice Department, to discuss serious and systemic problems as he saw them occurring within youth justice? Were you aware of that?
Not to my recollection, and not being in government, there's probably no chance I would have been aware of that.
In April of 2012, you were in government, you just weren't the Chief Minister, right?
Sorry, we were in opposition, I mean.
Yeah, no, I think we
were in opposition.
You're in opposition.
April 2012.
So you weren't aware of that meeting and you didn't subsequently become aware of that meeting. Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
I mean, that would have been a meeting that was held internal of government of the day. And
very well.
With the relevant portfolio minister.
And if it had come to the attention of the Chief Minister of the day, would that subsequently have come to the Chief Ministers who followed in time?
No, not necessarily.
Very well. But in that meeting, Dr Barth has given evidence in these proceedings, or will be giving evidence when the statement is tendered, that he showed 3 or 4 videos to...
Commissioners, I object. My client said he's A, wasn't in government, B, wasn't aware that the meeting had occurred and has not come into possession of any information confirming it's occurred. Now my friend's prefaced a hypothetical. I object to the question. He can't answer.
It just depends what the question is. I think he's laid some groundwork, but I take it that you're not going to...
Well, I'm not suggesting he was aware of the meeting. In fact, that's the point of the question.
Well, are you going to ask him, has he at any time ever seen the footage? Is that...
Yes, I'll come to that, yes.
Because I think that's proper.
I don't object to that.
I'm going there, Mr Mayor. You see, what the Children's Commissioner said, that he gave these high-level bureaucrats information about concerns that he had about systemic problems. You've probably become aware of that since, but you weren't aware of it then. No. And he showed these 3 to 4 videos, which also featured on the Four Corners program, which shocked and horrored everyone, including you. You understand that?
Yeah.
And he spoke to these senior bureaucrats about other broader concerns, such as excessive periods of isolation, which have become front and centre in this Royal Commission. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Mr Middlebrook was notified of that very meeting that very same day. Do you understand that?
Well, I'm not aware of that.
That you're not aware of that. I'm telling you that's the situation.
I'm taking your word.
Now, apparently, Mr Elfrink was not made aware of that meeting despite taking over the portfolio. Do you understand that's the situation?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Well, you could ask Mr Giles to assume that is the case.
You can assume that.
I don't think John was the minister for at least 3 months till after, or 5 months till after then or something. So.
In any event, after the gassing incident, which occurred on the 21st of August 2014, Dr Howard Barth urgently sought a meeting with Minister Elfrink. Were you aware that that took place? Mr Elfrink told us about that yesterday.
The meeting took place?
Yes.
I can't recall it. Well,
you didn't see Mr Elfrink give evidence yesterday, is that the case?
I saw a bit of him on footage late yesterday.
All right.
But I don't know if he was having a meeting with the Children's Commissioner at the time. It's not something he would tell me about. I wouldn't know who each minister was meeting with at any... It doesn't matter who it was at any point in time.
And in those days following the gassing incident, Dr Barth met with Minister Elfrink and showed him a draft copy of the report,
right,
which contained the still images that you've been shown today by Councillor Assisting. Do you understand that?
I accept it.
And you're saying that as Chief Minister at that time, you did not become aware of that meeting between the the Minister for Corrective Services and Youth in the Youth Department and...
To the best of my recollection, no. It's
right.
not to say that someone didn't tell me that John had a meeting with Howard. I mean, maybe they did, but to my recollection,
Mr. Giles, in your role as you're the Chief Minister, what would your expectation be of your ministers? What level of incident would those photos, for instance, that you saw, would you expect they would be raised with you?
not necessarily.
Something like
Different
that.
different ministers work in different ways.
No, but I'm talking about you as Chief Minister. Would you
No.
expect it to be raised? What would be the level of incident that would, from an ordinary portfolio, would you expect to be raised with you as Chief
I'll
Minister?
try and recall different types of briefs. Particularly from an AG's point of view, Attorney General, you might get briefs saying that at the Ministerial Council, there's an agreement to try and change a national reform on
A death in custody,
something.
would it be, a death in custody would be raised with you?
Yeah, you'd probably
expect?
you wouldn't expect, but you could be informed about a death
No,
in
but I'm
custody.
talking about your expectation. Would you, if a person died in custody, would you expect to be told on it? You wouldn't.
No,
And so you wouldn't be expecting to be told about incidents like that we've seen on those videos?
no. I mean, we were briefed after the gassing incident in Cabinet, which I think was the right thing to do. But a death in custody is not something that I would normally expect to be told. I could be told, but I wouldn't expect to be
Oh, like
told.
it would be in the papers and all that, but I mean, before it hit the papers,
Well,
would you
normally,
like to be,
a lot of those things you learn about because of the instant knowledge of media. You learn about in media before you learn about them in the office. A lot of those things. Not everything, but a lot of those things. Before you can get a hot issues brief or a phone call to say this has happened, quite often the media are aware of it before it happens. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying that's how it is.
I know we know each other, but,
Yeah.
and we know government, there's lots of times when we did briefs to ministers
Yeah.
about incidences and all around Australia. I'm just finding it curious about what was the expectation of what level of incident a death in custody wouldn't.
Well, I don't know if there's an internal rule in corrections about should the chief be briefed or who should be told. I don't know the internal machinations.
But again, I'm not saying about that. I'm
yeah.
saying your expectation to be briefed on a particular.
Well, I was always of an expectation that I should have been given a heads up on many hot issues across many portfolios, not just this portfolio.
Yeah.
And I was never 100% satisfied with the way I was given urgent information. Some portfolios better than others.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just picking up on that line of questioning then, you see what Minister Elfrink said to us yesterday was that he was so shocked by the images that he immediately said to the Children's Commission, you've got to report this to the police. Minister Elfrink was a former police officer, so that's obviously a level of understanding of how serious he thought these pictures were. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
And you've seen those pictures now, and you've seen, in fact, the footage, and you'd agree that they show extremely serious, possibly abuse of a young child.
Well, I'm not qualified to judge on that, but I was disturbed by those images.
Very well. Do you expect then that you should have been told by Minister Elfrink when he saw those images that you should have been told at that time?
No, I don't. And I say that probably to the disagreement of most people in this room, and that is that I had a high level of confidence in John to do the job. I had a high level of confidence in John being passionate about making reforms in the whole correction system. He wanted to drive change. I knew that he inherited some challenges, and I knew that he wanted to make improvements. It's not the best. I knew that he was working hard, and I had a lot of confidence in him managing things in a holistic way.
Looking back at it now, he's got these images. It's around just after the gassing incident. Howard Bath's brought them to his attention because he thinks it's relevant to what happened in the gassing incident. Ought you have been notified around August of 2014 as to what he was shown at that time by the Children's Commissioner?
I don't I don't know.
Very well.
If John, like in my opinion, if Minister Franklin Minister at the time thought he had a handle on the situation, thought he could identify the challenges, the issues, referred it to police, whether it was mandatory reporting or otherwise, and took the right approaches to rectify it, whether he should have told me or not, I mean, you'd have to be in that situation at the time.
Very well.
I don't know. I don't know what he was given by his agency for what he could send on.
Well, what that report also documented...
But we did have the Commissioner come into Cabinet and brief the whole of Cabinet as well.
And they did, and he didn't brief you about what these images showed. You didn't know about it at all at that time, correct?
I recall that the conversation in Cabinet without deliberating or sharing deliberations was not to the fullest extent of what I thought it could have been.
The Commissioner was withholding information that he had, obviously, by that stage, that you should have had, correct?
I didn't say that, but I would have liked
That's
to
a
have...
cultural cover-up that you're talking about, isn't it?
I would have liked to have received more information at that point in time.
Now, what that report also documented was that...
That's the Bath report.
The Bath report ultimately documented also instances of DCS staff hindering police investigations. You came to learn of that, didn't you?
Well, I don't know a lot about that.
Okay.
I haven't read the Bath report.
I want you to assume also that Commissioner Bath's report also documented failings by DCS staff to comply with their mandatory...
DCF staff?
DCF staff.
Yeah.
DCF staff to comply with mandatory reporting of child abuse under Northern Territory legislation. Did you come to be aware of that?
No.
So, and it, in many respects,
I think that... Sorry, just to...
when you talk about the culture of cover-up, it went all the way from the minister, I suggest to you, down to the staff themselves who are trying to prevent police from investigating and prevent anything from happening within youth detention to the betterment of the children in the system. Is that what you're talking about with cultural cover-up?
I'm not talking about it at all. I made reference to culture of cover-up earlier today, but that was particularly around the Hatchet job, you know, where everyone was sort of led to believe that the footage in Four Corners was a very recent time. And I thought, to me, that was the culture of cover-up. Why aren't I aware of all these things that happened? I didn't know they'd happen in 2010 and 2011. That's what I was referring to then.
You see, Colleen Gwynn became the Commissioner for Children. You understand that?
Yes.
And she did a report in 2015. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware
And you
of
see, some of the very same issues that Howard Bath was complaining in 2012 about to DCS staff became the very same focus for Colleen Gwynn in 2015. It's not just that it happened back in before you became government, it happened right throughout. Do you understand and accept that?
Well, what I understand is that we took a range of measures to make improvements. And if the Colleen Gwynn report or the Bath report or the Vita review or any of those other reviews provided guidance about how improvements could be made, and we were making improvements in a range of areas.
You seem to suggest, Mr. Giles, that because you weren't the minister, it didn't happen under your watch. But the reports seem to suggest that, in fact, it happened well before your watch and during your watch. Do you accept that?
Well, I accept full responsibility as Chief Minister for whatever happened when I was the Chief or even before we came into government. That's the role of the person at the top. If I didn't know the information at the time, though, it's very hard to pass judgment on that.
And that's because you say it was covered up. That's how you didn't come to learn.
Well, I referred to the culture of cover-up again as what I had seen on the footage on Four Corners, which I was under the assumption that had been filmed in the last 6 months.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Do you want to ask any more questions before I ask Mr. Maley if he wishes to ask his client question?
Sorry, there might be.
Oh, I thought that there was this kind of lack of interest in.
Not at all. It's just that noticing the time of 4
Yes.
1 o'clock, I thought it might be a more convenient way of allotting their advocates if Mr O'Brien went before me because
His was
I knew
shorter.
how much time he had.
It was I thinking that we were really marching on extraordinarily quickly. Not at all. Well, we'd like to. Well, if we do that, we'll take a shorter, perhaps lunch break, so that we can finish. Because we have Mr. Middlebrook coming back this afternoon as well. Yes. All right. Can people manage with a half-hour lunch break? The threat, of course, is that there is always tomorrow, and I'm sure that wouldn't please anybody very much, so we'll try and truncate it down in those sorts of times. So, Mr. Giles, just a half-hour lunch break, if you don't mind. So we'll come back at 25 to 2. Thank you.